here. See if okay. Greetings, everybody. This is Timothy Mount. I'm a member of the board of directors of Adirondack Wilderness Advocates. We're a group that is dedicated to protecting the wild places in the Adirondacks, as well as enhancing remoteness and solitude. This interview is part of our series of interviews called Wild Thoughts Videos. And today our guest is Jason Thurston, who is a strong and influential advocate for accessibility in the Adirondacks for years. Welcome, Jason. Can you please give us a little background about you?
Sure, Tim. Thank you, and thank you for having me. I uh, I grew up in Vermont. I went to Paul Smith College in 1991. Where I came from in Vermont became very developed, and so the idea of Forever Wild really took to me. And I uh, worked in Lake Placid for many years as a chef. Um, I My first wife was from Keene, so I became pretty embedded in the whole system. And then in 2004, I broke my neck in my own swimming pool, and that kind of changed everything. Um, I came out with a very powerful experience. I excelled with all my physical therapy and really took to it. And within a couple of years, I was contacted by the Independent Living Center. So I got involved with the disability community and really took a deep dive into that as far as advocacy. And so that's kind of my two sides of the coin is I come from the disability community and I also believe in protecting. So I'm
Right.
trying to come to a good compromise. In 2020, I got together with the ADA coordinator. There was one that was retiring, um, who had been uh, so influential in ever since the Galusha settlement. I don't know if you know about that in 2001.
No, I'm
But
not familiar with
she
that.
was retired. Carol was retiring, and Leah was taking over, and it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So I invited them out to the park, to John Dillon Park, um, and and got her to. Uh, are you gonna edit this? Okay. Um, Back up. Anyways, so she handed the torch over. I spent a lot of time with Leah. Leah got me on we started the advisory board again, the accessibility advisory board to the DEC and the APA.
Yes.
And during COVID, she was new and I was new, and we had a lot of the time and a lot of passion for it. So we met every month back in our, from like October of 2020 and into 21. In 21, we had a banner year. We had a outdoor accessibility day at John Dillon Park, um, where I've been the outreach coordinator since 2019. I guess I skipped over that, but yeah,
So
and we all
people
got
know,
together and
so people know about the park. It's a park dedicated for accessibility with lean-tos, and people can camp there. And you went there yourself and camped there many times by yourself because of the facilities there.
yes, there's 9 lean-tos and 3.5 miles of trails, and it's been on my mind ever since the first time I was there in 2015.
Okay, and
I
it's
talked myself into the job in 20.
down
Pardon?
by Long
Pardon?
Lake. It's down by Long Lake, and
Yes,
it's bordered
yes.
by
It's
Paul
about
Smith College.
yeah, if you're on Route 30, just past Tupper Lake, and if you're coming from the other way, it's not far from Blue Mountain Lake.
Okay,
So you get into Long Lake, and then the yeah, it was built by International Paper in a they had put up the money. It runs off an endowment. But there were three pillars to the whole making of it, and the advisory board, and that was the DEC, Paul Smith College, and International Paper,
okay,
and they had representatives from all those for a long time.
okay, great. So, that's a bit about your background and everything you've been involved with since your accident. Um, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the DEC's proposal about OPDMDs. So this is other power-driven motor devices. I think, is that right? Oh, other power
Mobility, but yeah, you got it.
mobility
Yeah, it's
devices, not motor devices.
right.
Mobility, right. And the DEC has just come out with a proposal. And I have to say, I didn't mention this to you before, but it's interesting that the DEC seems to be in the vanguard on this issue a bit because I did some research at various national parks, like Glacier, Yosemite,
Mhm.
Yellowstone, Rocky, as well as state parks in New Hampshire, Vermont, places that are similar to the Adirondacks. And I didn't see any policies. I mean, basically, they said, well, these devices can be used in these particular areas on these particular maintained flat trails. Um, but they didn't say, what about the backcountry? I guess that's the main point. They really didn't have a policy. And it sounds like, unless you know of people that are doing this, it sounds like the DEC is right in there trying to get ahead of this game.
Well, just to point out, I'm a big podcast guy, and I just found one on the national parks, and it went into the history of what the definition of wilderness, capital W wilderness,
Yeah,
not to be trammeled by man.
yeah,
So, other power-driven mobility devices are not allowed in wilderness areas.
period. At that park.
Period.
And they
Full
said that.
stop.
What, do
Yep.
you mind saying which park that was?
I don't know. I was listening to the definition of wilderness. It was
Oh, it wasn't a
on a
specific,
podcast.
it wasn't a specific
No, it
park.
was talking in general about the national parks. They were going through Yosemite uh, and Glacier yeah,
Okay.
they were actually talking about how the forests weren't left untouched. They were managed by native peoples.
Yes, yes. So that brings us back to the Adirondacks
Yes.
and the proposal, which is quite detailed. They go through and list all the different types of devices that exist nowadays. And there are quite a few, ranging from wheelchairs up to, e-bikes and segways. And then we've all seen pictures of these little tanks that go around on treads, and which is the most interesting to me. And they also make a case saying that, well, you never know what's going to happen next. What are they going to come up with next? That the technology is going to continue to develop. So they go into all those definitions, and then they also have a table. It's table one, where they list places where uh, devices are allowed and recommended, places that are safe. Um, and they list a number of specific places. Um, for example, Boreas Ponds or Great Camp, not Sagamore, but Santanoni.
Santoni's a hot button topic.
Yeah,
That's kind of what
yes, it is.
got us really rolling on
It
a lot
did.
of
I
things.
got us going. Uh, but so that's table one. And then they also have a table of what devices are allowed where in general. And the
Right.
one that struck the Adirondack Wilderness Advocates, is
Okay.
category of wilderness, primitive, and canoe areas, which are the wildest places in the park. And they list all the devices that are not allowed in those places. I think it's numbers 2 through 7. We don't have to get into each individual one, but not number one. Number one is allowed anywhere in the park, according to this proposal. Now, number one are devices, as we discussed, which can weigh up to 400 pounds and up to 40 inches wide. The 400 pounds is without an occupant. That's just the device itself. And 40 inches, to give people an idea of what 40 inches is, that's wider than the front door of my house, and certainly wider than any
By a
door
little bit.
in my house. Yes.
Yep.
Um, and so these devices, as opposed to a wheelchair, which are less wide and less heavy, they can go, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, that can go inside these doorways. So what's your take on that, on this, on these OPDMDs, which are proposed to be allowed in wilderness, primitive, and canoe areas?
Well, first of all, I thought number one was referring to basically any power wheelchair, which I've used for 22 years. And the wheelchair itself weighs almost 300 pounds. It goes about 8 miles an hour. It's very quiet, and that's what I live in. That's my freedom.
Right.
So I was under the impression that number one was just basically a power wheelchair.
Well, but I think it allows devices bigger than that and heavier than that. They do have a 4 mile per hour limit, not eight, as you just mentioned.
40 inches, 400 pounds, maximum speed 4 miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah, and 40 inches wide. Now,
Oh, here's where it is right here. I just found it.
okay,
Um, it's part of the definition of a wheelchair. The definition of a wheelchair is something that is prescribed by a doctor for a person with a disability specifically. And that is not considered in other power-driven mobility devices. That is a personal device that's
okay,
used. And it says specifically here, power-driven device designed primarily for use of individual with a disability, the main purpose of outdoor locomotion.
yes. And the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, clearly specifies that wheelchairs are allowed to go anywhere anybody can go
Right,
under power, and they're allowed any of those
right.
places. But I think what we're wondering about with this proposal, if they're talking about bigger devices, devices that could possibly damage the trail, or that could be unsafe for either the user or people that they might meet on the trail, or that they run up against obstacles that might be insurmountable, steps, rocks, climbing, things like that. And we're wondering what's going on with this. So,
Well, as a
insight?
power wheelchair user of 22 years, I can tell you I know when I'm safe. I know how to avoid obstacles. I'm very well aware of my surroundings. As a matter of fact, I can fly through doorways within inches at high speeds without touching anything and go in circles and not run into any. I mean, I'm very well aware of my spatial. Not that everybody is, but I think that anybody that uses a wheelchair on a regular basis and has for any length of time, it develops an instinct on what
Sure.
is safe and what is not, and what to do if they encounter anything. And that brings me to my major realization. It wasn't until 2013 that I really tried to go outdoors, and it was the Red Dot Trail out of Paul Smith College, and I tried to go on the simplest part of it, and my wheels dug in, and I was stuck. And any kind of roots or rocks, my clearance with this chair is about 4 inches.
Mhm.
So I'm not going over anything
It's not
unless
much.
it's smooth and level, and I can tell, you know what I mean? I just look at it and I know whether I can get through it or not. Um, that being said, I understand what you're talking about. Whereas, somebody that may be newly injured or claims to have a disability that is marginal at best, that's the crux. You don't want just anybody claiming that they have a disability and taking whatever vehicle they want anywhere they want as fast and right.
Right,
Um, so it's right at the heart of the whole issue.
right. And claiming the disability is perfectly fine as well. I mean, a ranger or anybody else is not allowed to ask somebody, not allowed to ask them to prove that they are disabled. If they say they are, they are, and that's the law. Um, but I guess we're more concerned with the other devices, devices that are bigger than a wheelchair. Like I said, with little tank treads that might uh, damage the forest floor, or if you have a 400-pound device with a 200-pound occupant, you've got 600 pounds going on, say, a wet, muddy trail. What's going to happen to that trail if that happens? So these are some of the difficult questions I think that we're facing and that we're trying to address here.
Sure, sure. I have been a huge advocate for accessible trails that are built that way. I met with Peter Walsh, who built the trails at John Dillon Park, and he went over the all the fine details and walked me through it and the drainage and the, you know, this is what the rail trail's made out of.
Yes, well,
And
yeah,
it's crushed stone with
Florida.
stone dust and that's packed.
Yeah,
And that's really the only terrain that I can go on with this chair. I My traction is not very well, but the chair does weigh, with me in it, 400 pounds. And it doesn't leave a mark. Here's the thing. The two key components of an accessible trail, the 36 in, at least 36 inches wide, and it the definition of firm and stable. And firm means that when you go over it, it doesn't make an impression. And
right.
stable means that when you go on it, it doesn't slip. And this is one of the things that I've discovered at John Dillon Park. People with manual wheelchairs, we are actually needing to resurface them. When I met with the guy who built the trails, he explained this to me. But the because they're not considered stable because they slip, because they've been raked over and they're not packed anymore. So when a person with a manual wheelchair goes to go on that and they push every inch. There's no glide. If it's a hard packed surface, you push and you glide and you push and you glide and you push and you glide. I watched a guy who was a quad rugby player who played competitive sports in his manual wheelchair, who's in really good shape, struggle on the trails because they slip. So when you talk about making an impression, that's something that, a regular wheelchair is not going to be able to even go there.
Right. So, and this, you're talking about a place that was built specifically with wheelchairs in mind. And there's trouble there. After a number of years, you saying it has to be resurfaced. So, what does that say about your typical Adirondack trail, which frankly are not very good? They're pretty rough.
Well, it's always changing. The weather affects it, and depending on how they're built and drainage, and
Sure.
I mean, there's floods and trees come down, and torrential rains and ice and snow, and the condition of the trails is what the DEC is constantly, all summer long with their trail crews out, just trying to cut down trees that are in the way, cut trees that are in the way, or fill in the holes, or big puddles, or whatever. Yeah, Mother Nature's gonna do her damage on any given trail for sure.
And with the hundreds of trails in the Adirondacks, it's a Sisyphean task. They're never going to be able to stay on top of the whole thing. And you've got blowdown, constant blowdown. I mean, as soon as any kind of device comes up with a section of blowdown, you're in trouble. But and you compare these trails to, like, say, Zion, which are built, they're hardened, they have all kinds of work went into them. I understand that the new trail up Cascade Mountain, the most popular trail in the Adirondacks, they're building a
Oh
new
God.
they're building a new trail, and I'm sure that's going to be national park standards, but it's taking them years, years. Most Adirondack backcountry trails are rough and not greatly maintained. And so
Yeah,
that's why we start scratching our heads about these devices going back there.
right, right. Well, you're talking about wild forest, right? Not wilderness.
Uh, Both. I mean, wilderness trails, wild forest trails.
Doesn't it say they're not allowed in wild forest? Oh, the class one is, you said.
Class one is, yes, class one is in
Mhm.
wilderness and wild forest and canoeing.
I think the definition of category one needs to be adjusted a little bit,
Yes, yes, I
and
think,
I completely agree with you there.
yeah.
To me, it reads mostly what I'm sitting on,
Yes,
and I know what I'm sitting on won't go on any trail that's not built to be accessible.
right,
I just know that.
yes,
And somebody with a manual chair is not going to attempt anything like that. So that's what is allowed, but it's allowed, but you can't, it doesn't have the capability to do it. That's why this other power driven mobility device issue is such a hot button topic because, and from the beginning, I've always said, I just want a little bit more.
you want a
I
little
have
bit
a
more,
little bit more access
a little
to
more
to
access.
more of the woods, I don't know what that looks like. I mean, in that thing that I wrote about the slump, it's the state land unit management plan and the amendments that were made to that are what brought this whole thing up. Then it calls back to the law that was amended in the Americans with Disabilities Act was amended in 2011, and it basically stated that uh, it started with the invention of segways and whether they were allowed in stores. But what it morphed into was any given entity had to come up with a policy on what they would or would not allow in their area. And so that extends itself to the Adirondack Park. So we're just developing a policy. The policy can be nothing's allowed anywhere. The
Right.
policy can be that, the the things that you're talking about, the big four-wheelers maybe, or very similar wheelchair adaptations nowadays that can, like the track chair. There's some of the electric uh, like wheelchairs that could possibly do damage, but that's why it's so difficult.
Yes,
Is
it is. So this table one I was referring to before, they specifically say that places which are approved OPDMD uses are recreational trails and campgrounds, administrative roads, Newcomb Lake Road, the Adirondack Rail Trail, designated bike trails, and then other areas identified in attachment B. Now, I forgot to look it up, but I have been in touch with, I think it's the Open Space Institute. I can't remember, but
oh, the Open Spaces Committee?
I, I don't know, but it's another
They didn't touch
enviro.
on disability alone.
Well, there's an
I'm
environment
familiar a
group,
little
and I
bit.
wish I don't have, I can't find it right now, but they had an intern this last summer who did a survey and visited what were potentially all of the accessible trails in the Adirondacks, including, of course, the rail trail.
Oh, I know who you're talking
Are
about.
you know that? Yes.
I met her. It's the Adirondack Land Trust.
There we go. There we go.
I've been working pretty closely with Adirondack Land Trust. As a matter of fact, the chairman of their board, Steve Burrington, I'm in contact with on an almost weekly basis. He has a son that had a spinal cord injury when he was young, and he's very athletic. And so he's gone on to use adaptive mountain bikes. So that's his stake in all this, is he wants to be able to use adaptive mountain bikes where bikes can go.
Well, this intern
But
came
some
up.
adaptive mountain bikes have a throttle,
Yeah.
which on what level do you call it?
Yeah. Well, that's an issue on the rail trail. what level e-bikes are allowed and whether or not people
Right,
abuse that. You have to,
right,
you have the ones that are allowed are ones that you have to pedal at the same time, um, as opposed to those that you don't have to pedal, which are like little motorbikes. But this intern came up with, I think, about 30 different trails, and they're pitifully short and they're pitifully few given the size
oh
of the.
God.
But she was out there and she did identify them, and there need to be more. Um, but it seems to me that that is the way to go, to identify places and build new ones that will accommodate these devices safely, rather than just,
Right.
you want to go up Marcy, good luck, you know.
I don't see that happening. Um, I have been working on this issue intensely for the better part of 5 years, and since I've been in the committee.
Yes.
And the past, well, aside from my illness, I was in bed for a while, but there was 2 or 3 years there where I was very active. And Adirondack Land Trust has taken up a bunch of conservation easements in some beautiful places, and they have all the plans to build accessible trails. It's going to be great. There are two spots. The one is out towards Paul Smith's from Saranac Lake, still very controversial, but it's going to be an accessible trail through a meadow and down to a wetland area, which is going to be great. Um, John Brown Farm also has money to make their trails accessible. And then Adirondack Mountain Club consulted me, and they actually have a maybe 2.5 mile trail around Heart Lake. They were going to make that accessible.
Oh,
That's going to be their accessible spot out
that's
there off the Lodge Road.
good. Yeah, I was surprised at the mileage at the park. What, the John Dillon Park? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, three and a half miles.
Yeah, 3.5. I mean, that's compared to most of these accessible trails, that's pretty
Oh
long.
my God.
So, and
My
we need more
my
of
my
those.
stump speech has always been something you just echoed, and it's like, when it comes to accessible trails, it's always been okay. There's a little tiny paved trail right next to the road for you people.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
For,
John Dillon Park's quite the opposite of that. The spot was chosen out of 275,000 acres that International Paper owns specifically, but it
uh,
wasn't chosen initially to be accessible. The accessible part came in later.
uh,
One of their, yeah. Anyways, so that's why it's so remote, and that's why it's great. It's 2 miles off the main road. It's in Hamilton County, which is the least populous county in New York State. I think they boast to only have like two stoplights in the whole county or something crazy like that. But it's off the main road. You can barely, I mean, you can't hear the traffic. That's a big thing, right?
yes, it
When you
is.
can't hear the traffic.
That's
And it's so remote and it's beautiful. I mean, the stars and but yeah, the main part of the campground is there's three pairs of lean-tos, and the loop trail is a mile. And then there's a 2.5 mile trail that goes out to another pair of lean-tos on another body of water at
right
Handsome Pond.
on
So
the
that trail, that 2.5 mile trail, which if you're going down and back is 5 miles, is what really took my breath away and made me fall in love with that place. Because where else can you do that? Where
exactly
else can you get in the middle of the woods with a wheelchair? There's not. So
exactly.
that's why I am very passionate about this, is because I grew up in the woods, in Vermont. My family had 350 acres in the family that had been in the family. Originally, it was 350. They sold off a bunch of it, but going back 8 generations.
Uh,
And I'm a Gen X total.
yeah,
Parents say get outside and don't come back until dinner. And so I explored those woods, and that's how I grew up. And my father was very into forestry and explained all the trees and all the So for me to be told that little trail by the road over there is for you people,
I know.
I don't, I don't go for that.
I love that. I love the way you
I'm trying to work on it, and I recognize the
yeah,
challenge of access versus protection.
right. And of course it boils down to money as well. We everybody always said we need more rangers, we need more this, we need more that, and we need more accessible trails. And the remoteness is something that really, catches our attention. Being away from roads, we're actually measuring that. Like, what does remoteness really mean? How far away from a road do you have to be
Mhm.
in order for anybody to experience that remoteness, rather than, as you say, just some little thing in a campground or alongside the road? Because that's why we're all involved with this group, is because of remoteness. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's crucial, and
Yeah,
that's what
that's
would set the park
it's the it's in
apart.
my heart, like that's absolutely everything I live for, what I think about, and what I strive for. Um, uh, what was I going to say? Oh, the other thing I always point out, I did a bunch of presentations when I worked for the Independent Living Center and went all over about what independent living is, and then also I do a disability etiquette training. It's only like a 20-minute thing, and I put it together and I went up and down Main Street, Saranac Lake, and any organization that wants me to do it, I go through it, and it basically just it gives you some guidelines on language and how to approach people and how to offer help and how to interact with a person who has vision impairment or who has hearing impairment or
Yes,
has trouble speaking. It goes through all of those things. And the whole goal of it is so that people don't feel uncomfortable, because if you don't know, you don't know, right? So do I use the word handicap? Try not to. But but there's a whole bunch of other words that have been phased out a long time ago.
sure.
Um, but I always approach it like the first part is, if you don't know, you don't know. Like before my accident, there's so many things that I didn't notice. Of course, I was in my 20s, but you don't, unless you know somebody in a wheelchair, what I call wheelchair adjacent, whether you're a family member, a friend, or a neighbor or whatever, and you go with somebody in a wheelchair and you go even down a main street and there's a threshold that's this high and you're like, I can't go in because I can't get over that threshold. It's very simple, minute things. Or if you go into a store and the aisles are all crowded or whatever.
Yeah,
So I always do the accessibility etiquette thing. But the big thing I point out is that everybody is only temporarily able-bodied, right? I mean, there's going to come a day
sure,
when your body's going to break, whether it's your vision or your hearing or your mobility.
sure.
And the thing that I live for, I just want to finish this. The thing that I live for is at John Dillon Park when I encounter somebody who loved the outdoors and then became disabled, so they weren't able to go anywhere and find that remote experience. And I meet them and they are just enamored because it's been X amount of time since they've been able to do that. And they never thought they were going to be able to do that. And I can relate to it. And so that's why my big passion is creating accessible trails for sure.
Yes. And I love that you point out we're all in this together. Eventually, we're all in this together. So I think
Right.
we're going to have to wrap things up, Jason. I really
Okay.
appreciate you taking the time. And I just want to ask one more quick thing. Are you
Sure.
going to continue to be involved in this proposal that the DEC is putting forth?
Oh, front and center.
Okay, great.
Front and center. And this is, it's still a working document, We
Okay.
still have there's a meeting going on February 4th, I believe.
Yes.
And
Well,
then there's a comment period that's open until March 6th.
right. And anybody
And
can,
as a committee, we're going to get together somewhere in between there and work on our suggestions for how to modify it. So this is just a framework, and we can definitely
great.
zero it down a little bit more.
Super. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes.
And I wish you
All
the
right.
best. And we'll see you again
Thanks,
sometime.
Jim.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.